Gaeve, Cards Gael, thank you very much for coming here today to Galway. Beautiful city, city of the tribes. And I'd like to say before we start, because I probably won't say it at the end, I'd like to thank Declan for consenting to participate in this debate. So what I'm going to do, so we're talking about the future of Europe and Ireland's part in the political union of the European Union. First, we're going to deal, one is a political entity, the European Union is a political union. As I said, we were in one before, it was called the British Empire, and we got shafted. Now we're 1% less than 1% of the population in the European Union, and these people who we did not elect have power to make laws and impose them upon ourselves. The other entity is Europe, which is a geographical and cultural entity. Geographically, it's, if anybody knows how long it's existed, answers on a postcard, very, very, very long time. And as a cultural entity, it has existed for millennia. Today, to begin with, I would like to talk about, one, the history of multinational empires, why they never work. To deal with it first historically, then philosophically, and then look at the EU on its contemporary basis. Sorry, was the papers here? Sorry. So one is that I think that the biggest issue in Europe at the minute is not the difference between left and right, but it's between those, but it's about freedom, democracy and identity. The EU does not make sense, I believe, from a historical, economic or a democratic point of view. Why historically? Because if we look at the vast sweep of history over many centuries, we can see that multinational empires never work. They have existed and they come up to a zenith of power and then they fall away. Look at what happened to the Roman Empire, to the Ottoman Empire, to the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. Even in our own lifetime, we see the explosive breakup of Yugoslavia. The problem with, and now if we look, see, the problem about these multinational empires is that they tried to give the sense to the people who were inside that they were inevitable, that they would endure, they could never be defeated. But if we go to the sands of Egypt and Tunisia today, we see these remnants of great buildings now covered in sand, where these great empires held court and held power. People were led to believe that these empires, that they were invincible, that they were indestructible, and most of all, that they were inevitable. That is the same thing that the European Union tries to do today. But as that you have the Roman Empire, the Ottoman Empire, and obviously the one we were in was the British Empire. The British Empire thought they would hold Ireland and make our laws, make it subservient to their laws forever. But because of a small band of men and women in Ireland, they fought and went for their democratic self-control. The reason that these, philosophically then, the reason that these empires did not work, one is because there's always different, among multinational empires, there's always a difference in interests between various people. And we could see it even in Yugoslavia from the different nationalities within it, the Slovenians, the Croatians, the Serbs. They could keep it under almost like a police state. They could be held together, but after a while that had to blow up as their interests got touched upon. In regards democracy, as we move into the modern era, democracy depends on the existence of a demos. Democracy, democratus, power of the people. What is a demos? A demos is a people with a shared history, a shared language, a shared culture. At the bare minimum, it's a people who have a self-consciousness of a we. And the litmus test of this demos is that they're willing to pay taxes to help those who cannot help themselves within their own nation, because they feel a sense of solidarity and a sense of responsibility. Why should Irish people in 1,000 years hand over money that they earn through the work in taxes to people that they should build roads in Bratislava or sewage in Athens or anything like that? Like, we barely know where we don't visit these places, we don't know these places and the people within them. We don't feel a sense of solidarity with these people. Because why? Because we feel a sense of solidarity among ourselves as a people, and therefore we're willing to, as I said, to pay taxes and to do that. I believe that the cultural diversity of Europe is its strength. It's something to be celebrated. We can see the complete difference in mentality, the differences in language, in culture, what they eat, how they work, the attitudes to so many different things. Europe is an incredibly diverse place, like compared to, say, north of America. It's very, very different. And that's why I remember years ago, was a mutual friend of me and Declan, Timo Soini, who was Finnish foreign minister, and he used to describe me that the euro, the project of EU political integration, which was never an economic project of any proper design, that holding the economies of Greece and Germany together in one currency was like one man holding two watermelons together in one hand. It just does not work. It cannot work. Just give me an idea when it's 5 minutes are up, Bruce. So that's my thing from side of one looking at the history, two philosophy, and now I will go on more in the second part about how the EU has affected Ireland and what our response should be. So Declan, over to you.
Thank you, Hermann, and thank you for the invitation to come here today. It's great to see meet with you all. I realise I may be in a minority of one here today, but that wouldn't be the first time. So, to pick up a few things on a few points that Hermann raised, first of all, in terms of these places that are far away and that we don't really know anything about them and we've nothing in common with them. It conjured up to my mind the words of Neville Chamberlain when he came back from the Munich conference, when he talked about having carved up Czechoslovakia, describing it as a faraway country of which we know little, and we know what happened after that. The other thing I would mention in terms of I really fundamentally disagree with Hermann on this point, that we are so different. If you were to come out to my house this evening, in one of the rooms in my house is a coloured photograph from the era of the First World War. And when people come to my home and they're sitting down, they're having dinner in the dining room, they see this picture, this photograph, this coloured photograph of this guy in a grey uniform, that's clearly from the early part of the last century. You see them sort of looking because they're wondering, why isn't it a khaki-coloured uniform? I mean, as an Irishman and as from a family that was always back and over between Ireland and England and Ireland and the US, I had two of my great-uncles killed in the Irish regiments of the British Army in the First World War, like probably many other people here. So many Irish families lost people. We commemorated 100 years at the end of the First World War just last weekend. But the reason that the photograph in the dining room is of somebody in a grey uniform is because it's my wife's grandfather, who was Polish, who was in the Polish Legion of the Austrian Army. That part of Poland, Galicia, was in the Austro-Hungarian Empire at the time, and he fought in the Tyrol against the Italians, who were on the Allied side in the First World War. And he was taken prisoner of war, and he was held as a prisoner of war in Italy. as an Austrian prisoner, and was released at the end of the war and emigrated to America and married somebody from his local village in Poland. And his granddaughter is my wife, born in New York, of Italian and Polish descent, and our children have that common heritage. So for my kids, they had their great-great-granduncles. Two of them were killed on the Western Front, and their great-great-grandfather fought in the Austrian army against the Allies in the First World War. So these ties are closer than we sometimes think. Timo Soini, a friend of mine and Hermann's, let me tell you about Timo. Timo is he's still the foreign minister of Finland. He was the deputy prime minister. He's a wonderful guy. You would all greatly admire him. He is Eurosceptic, but not anti-Europe, and he doesn't want to see the European Union dissolve, but he does want to see it radically reformed. And the interesting thing about Timo is, for example, Timo's pro-life. He and his wife, Tina, are pro-life. They happen to be Catholics and practicing Catholics. And there are many, many more things that I could tell you about Timo and Tina and their wonderful children, because they're close family friends of mine and Delia's and of my family. And I have more in common with Timo and Tina than I do with half of the people that voted yes for abortion here a few months ago. This guy's from Finland. He's the foreign minister of Finland. I have more respect for him and a lot more in common with him than I have with Simon Harris. I want to spend time in the company of Timo and his family. I really don't want to spend time with Simon Harris, and I'm sure he doesn't want to spend time with me. And what I'll point to, and I think what we've seen, and this is a great tragedy of where things have gone in Europe, I suppose really since Nice, but certainly in terms of my direct experience since the Lisbon Treaty debates, is the common, regular, decent people of Europe, the people who aren't wackos, the people who are what I would call quiet conservatives with a small c, all over Europe, who just want to be left alone, who want to be able to go out, earn a living, bring up their families in the culture, the faith, the ideas, whatever it may be that they have, go out, work hard, be able to take home what you earn without having the government stick its hand in your pocket and taking most of your money and your earnings off you in taxes, and while delivering sloppy services. Most people just want to be left alone by what they used to call in the 17th century quiet government. Quiet government was a government that you barely knew existed. What it did is it kept enemy armies out of your country, and it really didn't bother you too much. And it made sure that there were courts and judges to be able to administer justice so people didn't go around trying to administer it themselves. And most people in Europe, I believe, that's what they want. They don't want this overburdening, massive, all-powerful superstate. I don't think they want that. I know they don't want that.
What are they getting?
They're getting that at the moment. But they're getting that because we have surrendered the ground to the ideological left, to the point where what used to be the centre-right, Christian democracy in Europe, is dead. It's gone. There's no Christian democracy left in Europe. There were great Christian Democrats that were founders of the European Union, that really led the idea of the European Union, and they're gone. I mean, Leo Varadkar, Simon Harris in Fine Gael, that's supposed to be the Christian Democrat Party from that tradition of Ireland. They're as loony left on social issues as anybody, as some hard left socialist. I'm not sure where their small c conservatism is. I'm not aware of it. I don't see it. Certainly not in taxes. I know what I'm paying every month. And this has happened right across Europe. And what's happened is that this big, unaccountable, soft left international has stolen the idea of Europe from people like us.
Okay, let me
I didn't interrupt you. They've stolen it from us. And they're very happy that people like you have to come here at an event like this and sit here and rail against the system because they've got hold of the levers of control right now. And you know what? They want the Brits out because the Brits were awkward. They always ask the tough questions. They want them gone out of the European Union. They're delighted to see them leave because they were the ones that were always putting their hands up and saying, no, you shouldn't be doing that. Do you think Macron and Merkel and that clown Verhofstadt would be talking about their European army if the British still had a serious seat at the table in Europe? Of course not. They would have said, oh, excuse me, I mean, that's quite ridiculous. You can't bring that up with the European army. Where are you going with it? It wouldn't even have been raised. And so with the British leaving, you get the worst instincts of these statists in Europe coming to the fore. And to put those worst instincts in check, to stop the march of idiocy across Europe, the worst thing that we can do is leave it to them, because they're not going to leave us.
Declan, can I interrupt you?
Yes.
10 years ago, you and I collaborated in a book which I still regard as a seminal source of information on how to deal with democracy and on the failure of democracy within Europe. And 10 years on, and you had many ideas which you put down and which were valuable. 10 years on, it is far, far worse. The remit that the EU has now established, which you referred to in your words, is far worse, and Hermann is engaged in a fight to end that one way or the other, either by departing from the mammoth EU with as many Irish people as will follow him, or bringing about the change. But nobody is fighting for that change.
I'm not interested in saying this.
No, that's true.
The political elites are intent on forming a single, centralised state to govern over an incredibly diverse continent. EU treaties are designed to give power to the European Commission. In the EU, you have, and I'm stealing one of your lines here, Declan, that you have to be unelected in the EU to initiate law. What kind of system is that, where the unelected make the law? And the European Parliament is the facade. The European Parliament only has the power to amend. It cannot repeal a single law in the EU. So when they hear all these Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil MEPs talking about, oh, but we've got the European Parliament, Ireland is less than 1% of the EU population, the rest can come together, make laws, impose them upon us, and there's nothing we can do. And the Parliament itself, as I said, cannot repeal a single law. And look what the EU, because they have this power, have done to Ireland over the last few decades. The Troika, 2011, three guys flew in a plane, came to Dublin, and they controlled our economy and our finances. The Troika, these people, the ECB, EU, IMF, they imposed 85 billion bank debt on the Irish people. We are now the third most indebted country per capita in the world. And our children and grandchildren will be paying that off because these people imposed it upon us. And let me say one thing. They said, I've been interviewed in Mad People, said, oh yeah, but that was history. That was history. That was 2011. Yeah. The same people who did that to you in 2011, if we continue to give them the power, they will continue and they will come back and do that again. Declan, tell me I'm wrong.
Good. You're wrong. You're right on most of it, Hermann. And this is the thing. I'm the wrong guy to have. I am not going to come here and defend the European Union as it is. It's crap the way it is, in terms of the way that it's operating right now. It is less democratic than it was because we've transferred so much sovereignty to the European Union that and transferred it away from individuals, the power of your vote to change things is very seriously diluted to what it was many years ago. That said, I don't think the right answer is to abandon Europe or to abandon the idea of a European Union. I'm not saying that that's the right idea. I'm not debating you, sir. I'm debating Hermann. So let's pick up the issue of the Troika, for example, and of blaming the European Union for imposing bank debt on Ireland. It's actually a pretty good example of what I'm talking about. There's a recording of me somewhere, you can find it on the internet, in 2010, standing outside government buildings saying that we should not do the bank bailouts, that the Irish government should not agree to sign up for the bank bailouts, that we should allow the banks to go through bankruptcy, that's what it's for. I called it bond aid for Brussels. I said we are propping up a number of banks, and I can give you, we can rattle off who those banks were that were exposed. Soc Gen, BNP Paribas, Deutsche Bank, the Deutsche Landesbanks, and many others. And that's what that bailout was done. But you know what? Nobody had the power to impose that on us. It was our leaders, the leaders that we elected, that we put into office, who had the power to say yes or no at that point. It suits them to blame Brussels or to blame the IMF, but it was their decision. I remember I was standing outside government buildings that evening. They could have said no, but they didn't have the courage to say no because they didn't have the confidence or the experience or the calibre or the character that when these experts came in and told them the whole world's going to melt down, the ATMs are going to stop working, there's going to be riots on the street, you'll have to deploy the army. They paint this appalling vista, and these guys chicken out. That's what happened. It was our leaders that did it. It wasn't the European Union that did it. It was our guys that signed us up for this, and they could have launched investigations afterwards into who got the bailout money, where did that money go. I called for it time and time again. Let's find out who ended up with the Irish taxpayers' cash, because we borrowed money to pay back the money that we didn't borrow.
Declan, we know who got the Irish taxpayers' cash. It was the Franco-German banks who got the Irish taxpayers.
It was, but it was our leaders that signed us up, Herman.
I'll deal with that. Actually, and Bruce, I'll compliment you. I've stolen one of your lines as well over the years, where the Irish press usually always call it the Irish bailout. I think it was Bruce, it was yourself, always called it the stitch-up. So I've stolen that one as well. Thank you very much. The thing is, where did the money go? It wasn't a bailout for the Irish taxpayer. It was where the Irish taxpayer bailed out these Franco-German banks at the behest of the ECB. You remember that Mr. Trichet wrote a letter to Noonan threatening that a bomb would go off in Dublin if the banks.
Herman, I was probably the first guy. It was myself and Konstantin Gurdjieff was probably the two first people out there saying this. As I say, the proof of it is there's a Sky News recording from the night of the bank bailout, where I'm interviewed saying this should not go ahead for all of those reasons. But we've got to blame the right people, Herman. It's not all the European Union's fault.
Look at the mentality of these people who are in charge. Those, like we heard here, Micheál Martin talking about the idea that Irish sovereignty is a backward mentality. These people, as I said, we had the Troika in 2011. We now have the Troika, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael and Sinn Féin. They're European Unionists, Euro loyalists. They are happy for Ireland to remain in and subservient to people we didn't elect and can't control in Brussels. And these people in Brussels will keep on imposing these laws upon us, and we continue to give them the power. The only way to stop them is to leave. Like, we look at our constitution, I think it's Article 20 talking to help me. I think it's Article 29.3, which allows the EU and EU law to run a horse and coaches through our constitution and over our Supreme Court. We have there in Lisbon a about the primacy. It reiterates about the primacy of EU law over Irish law and matters of EU. Yes, there is a slavish mentality among the political class in Ireland, and I'm saying that that is a major problem. But I will give you, Declan, that the thing that was in your book about let those banks go bust was absolutely correct. And it was one of the great things in the book, apart from the picture in the front page.
Photoshop was good. So
Can I interject?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
A vision of how to put right the problems facing Ireland in respect of the consolidated, readable Lisbon Treaty, which you concocted. You went on in the paper that we shared, and the government didn't either. The Irish government simply failed to distribute the text they wanted approved. That is, the text of the Lisbon Treaty rerun in 2009. The government used millions of euro for state-financed propaganda in favour of the Lisbon Treaty, but failed to publish the text we were voting on. They directly misinformed the public on key contents of the treaty. I doubt if many of the Yes campaigners ever actually read it, because with rare exceptions they are good people, and if they had done their homework and read it, they would have taken another view. At many of the speeches I made during the campaign, I said that if people didn't listen to a word I had said, they should just read that as much of the treaty as they could bear, and then they would know how to vote. The fact is that most Yes voters hadn't a clue about what was actually in the treaty. They thought they were voting for or against Europe because the Yes side ran an utterly dishonest campaign with sycophantic support from some sections of the media, most especially the Irish Times. Now that was, Garrett Fitzgerald was behind that process, and it was a corrupt and dishonest way of putting the treaty a second time, having said they wouldn't put it a second time. Now, that was bad enough then. The situation that we are talking about now is worse. So what do you do about it being worse?
I would say another aspect of carrying on about the EU with vast communication budget. Maybe it's a bit too crude to say it's propaganda, but they will only put out what it thinks are the good things that the EU does, and obviously ameliorate the bad things. But the reason that Ireland went in to the EU is that we were basically told that go into the EU gives you money and everything's hunky-dory. We were told when we went in, of course, it was a trading bloc, it was a common market, it was only about trade, but we found out many decades later that it was a political union by which these people can impose laws. But look at the money aspect of our EU membership. According to government records, since we joined, the EU has given us net 44 billion cash. The bank bailout alone, when we're then into negative, is 85 billion euro cash. And then the fisheries, according to Karen Devine, who did using Eurostat, looked at the amount of the wealth of fish taken out of Irish waters. That's 215. So if you add up 85 and 215, you take away 44, we're well over 200 billion
Hermann,
since we went in.
Hermann, our economy is the reason that it functions the way that it does, and it's ticking over surprisingly well right now, is because we are able to be a point of sale and a point of production to address a market of almost 500 million people, and under the customs arrangements and everything that are in place. So we have, at least for goods, a free trade area, and hopefully, and something I would advocate for, because Bruce's question was, what do you do? We need a common free trade area for services, because most of the economies in the European Union, the bigger part of their economy, the bigger part of their GDP is generated from services, not goods and products. So we need a truly free market for services, like banking, like insurance, because those are the things that will drop have a real effect on families and a real effect on costs. We need to get rid of stealth taxes, of hidden taxes like VRT. What's VRT except a tariff on car imports? That's what VRT really is, but it's dressed up as something else. We've got to stop crony corporatism, things like television licenses, which is, I mean, when you talk to an American about the concept of a television license, they say, what? You have to have a license for a television? I mean, a license for a gun, you know, they can kind of understand, but a license for a television? I mean, what's unlicensed TV possession? That's like a jailable offence or something? And this goes on right across Europe. We have an economy that is now completely plugged into a marketplace of 500 million people. To detach ourselves from that without a really, really brilliant plan to be able to grow our economy once detaching. We're not Britain here, we're not the UK. Once detaching from a market of 500 million people, I have not heard. I'm a pretty creative entrepreneur, and I've thought about how you would do that. And let me tell you, I haven't come up with a solution. I can. The hard thing to do, but that's right in front of us, is reforming the European Union. So let me talk about the how. Let me talk about the how. We see that I'm an entrepreneur. I don't agree. It's easy to say it's irreformable. It can't be done.
Because it's controlled by politicians.
Of course, it's controlled by politicians. But I believe it can be done. And I'll tell you why I believe it can be done. Because we had a crack at doing it, and you were part of that at the time. And we got one guy elected. One guy, that was it, in France, who already had a constituency on the ground anyway, Philippe de Villiers, in the Vendée in France. It was great that it was the Vendée, because the Vendée had stood up against the French Revolution back in the day. But what I learned was that actually you could flip the table on them. Because if we had maybe another 2 years of preparation, if we had more resources, frankly, more campaign money and campaign resources, if we weren't running it on a shoestring, and if we could have won over a sufficient number of editorial boards, just say, 3 or 4 key ones, in Germany, France, and a couple of other places, I think that we could have flipped the table in the European Union, in the European Parliament. And if you ended up with a bloc of people who were genuinely small c conservative, who don't want an all-powerful, unaccountable superstate, but who want to return power to the member states, to the nations, to families, to individuals. If you get a bloc in the European Parliament of sufficient size, notwithstanding the fact that the European Parliament is powerless, notwithstanding that fact, and you run people in national parliaments and in local elections, we can capture the idea of Europe back from these people that are driving it off a cliff. Because it is going to go off a cliff, and it'll go off a cliff in the next 20 years if this doesn't happen.
Okay, that's good. So, the good news is that the next European Parliament should come back with at least 180,000 to 200,000 Eurosceptics. I'd like to take up the point about why these companies, multinational companies, are here, why the Irish economy has grown. 1973, on average, tariffs around the world on goods was roughly 15%. So at this time, people could make a very decent argument that we need to go into the EU, that we need to be in a tariff-free area where goods and services, they've never really advanced very much in that. But in goods, the argument was, go inside the EU, we can transfer our goods easily without tariffs. Since that time, general tariffs on goods around the globe, on the influence of, in a post-WTO world, have fallen roughly to 3.5%. And the reason that multinationals, Dell, Pfizer, all these different ones, why do they come and invest? Why do they come to Ireland rather than France? Why do they come to Ireland rather than Germany or rather than Italy? Because they come here, businesses come here because they make a profit here, not because they love us. The low carbon tax regime attracts them here, it keeps them here. And what does the EU want to do? It wants to destroy it by introducing this CCCTB, Common Consolidated Corporate Tax Base, where the profits from these companies will go to where the goods are sold rather than where the company is headquartered,
Hermann,
which is Ireland at the minute.
You know the other way to destroy it?
No.
Leave the market. Leave the marketplace. That's the other way to destroy it. That's the real quick, in a day way to destroy it. I'd rather fight these fools on the common consolidated corporate tax base than cut off my nose to spite my face.
Okay.
I mean, we're in Galway City here. We're in Galway City, and there are thousands and thousands of people in this city, and our roads are jammed every day with people commuting in and out of town, working in companies that are here for the reasons that you have described. And they're also here for a couple of other reasons. There's talent here, and we have the common law. And the common law actually matters a lot because it protects property rights much better than the civil code, which is in most of the rest of Europe. That's why they come here, for those reasons. So we leave. What are you going to say to that family when that factory closes that's less than a mile from here, and when 1,500 people lose their jobs, and the main breadwinner in that family from Tuam or from Athenry or from Gort hasn't got a job anymore? Where are you going to get a job for them?
They won't leave. The reason why is because
they will leave, Herman.
They're making profits here. They're making profits
because they can sell into the single market.
Well, you know what? Just let me say that point. They will stay here because they're making a profit. They are making a profit because we have a low carbon tax regime. It's the European Union wants to destroy Ireland's low carbon tax regime. And look at exports. Ireland exports 20% of all its goods to the US. Right, hands up, anybody, everybody. Are we in a political union with the United States? No. Do we even have a free trade agreement with the United States? No.
What are we exporting to the US?
What?
You said we're exporting all of these goods to the US.
26% of our goods.
Okay.
That's the stats.
Mm-hmm.
I thought you caught me out there. No, but seriously, we're in there. These companies come here for a reason. If they lose that reason, they leave.
The reason they come here, folks, is for the
want to impose change, destroy our tax regime, and these companies will leave. So they want to kill the golden goose. Another thing.
If you leave the single market, they have no reason to be here. Low corporate taxes for a market of 4 million people is as useful as a chocolate teapot to them. They will be gone. They will definitely be gone. The only reason that they are here is, Herman's right, low corporate taxes, which we have to keep, and the way you fight to keep the low corporate taxes is by staying in the European Union and fighting these guys. And the other reason that they are here, the main reason that they are here, is because we're in the single market. That's why there are thousands of people. Don't shake your head. I know, I'm in business. I employ people 15 miles out the road here. That's why they're here. No, do you understand that these? You understand that Medtronic in Galway, that Medtronic is here to sell into the single market. Independence is the independence of the individual and of your family is the most important. Your family first, absolutely, yeah. Family first. You know what? This state right now, and the direction that this state is headed, if I would rather stay in a Europe where at least I know there are some people like Timo Soini, rather than be left with Simon Harris and Leo Varadkar. I've got nothing in common with these people.
Very sad.
I mean, the
EU is both a secularizing institution which wants to wipe out the individuality and genius of the diverse nature of European civilization. And on this thing about okay, that's about the corporate tax. And what about Ireland as a net contributor? This year, Ireland are giving the EU, into the EU budget, net €1 billion. Last year, 1 billion euro. Last year it was 200 million. So it's increased 5 times within a year. Going forward, the British are leaving. The EU will come looking to Ireland for more money as a net contributor since 2014. Ireland, why are we paying people we did not elect in Brussels to help create laws and impose them upon ourselves? And there's nothing we can do. Declan?
The goods that, when we leave, let's say, for argument's sake, that we leave and we exit and we cut ourselves off from the single market, what are these manufacturers, what are these employers going to do in your new Ireland? What are they going to do? Where are they going to go?
They're not going to leave.
They're not going to leave.
They're making profit.
Who are they going to sell stuff to? No, but you're out of the single market now. You've left the single market. So
and tariffs are?
You've left...
What's the rate of tariffs?
Pardon?
What the rate of tariffs now, not in 1973, are much lower than they were.
But you don't... So you think the EU will be fine with us leaving and fine with us being taking about 20% of all of the foreign direct investment that comes into the European Union, which comes into Ireland. We have a massively disproportionate amount of foreign FDI that comes into Ireland. You think they're going to be fine with that and that they're not going to put up any tariff barriers or do anything to disincentivize other countries from doing the same thing? I mean, look at what's going on in the UK right now.
The EU is not a friendly club.
So I'll tell you, tell me about it, that it's not a friendly club. I have been the subject of a standing ovation in the European Parliament when Danny the Red Cohen-Bendit, a communist, a self-confessed child molester, called for me to be investigated by the European Union. And Hans-Gert Pottering, the President of the European Parliament at the time, thanked him for his comment and told him that everything would be done. The EU, by the way, has no powers of investigation. And about half of the European Parliament stood up and gave that creep, Danny the Red, a standing ovation. So tell me about the European Union and what it's like to go up and fight the European Union. But I'm not a chicken. I'm not backing down from these people. I'm not going to be intimidated by them. They are weak. They have no ideas. They have no vision for the future of Europe. They've got no soul, for God's sake, and they've got very little passion. They're bullshit. They have the power. They have the power. Yes, they have. So let's take it off them. Take it off them at the ballot box, at the local level, at the national level, and at the European level.
I think he enjoys it, actually. Another aspect of...
Just one thing. Confucius says, if 6 people tell you you're sick before the bed, it's finished, Declan. And it's surprising that you can see
don't be good.
Confucius is Chinese, and by the way, the power that's winning right now, as we have all of this infighting going on, is China.
Okay, another aspect of it's a debate. Another aspect of EU membership, which has been gives both. I would say, Declan, like your arguments are like a low security prison, full of pros and cons. So you can steal that one. Another aspect of EU membership is that of mass immigration. That because of EU treaty law, that 500 million people all across Europe have an untrammeled right to come and live and work and live and reside in Ireland for the rest of their lives. Now, that is a problem. One, because it helps mass immigration, especially of cheap labour, helps to undermine the wages of the unskilled workers we have in Ireland. Two, it that EU legislation, as a consequence of EU membership, does not allow us as a country to to ask for the qualifications, to look for people who are well educated, well qualified, those who will contribute to help build up our society. And three, it also has, as we can see there recently in Sweden and in Germany, where sexual assaults have grown at an exponential level since 2015 with the mass immigration into those countries, that it's also a security risk. So immigration can be good if it can be controlled, and we have a say on the numbers and the qualifications and quality of the people who come here. But at the minute, because of EU membership, 500 million people can come here. There's nothing we can do to stop people. Like, it gives free movement for tourists and free movement for terrorists, and that is not a good idea in the future.
Again, what we're talking about is the actions of the European Union and its institutions under the current management. And all of this, everything that you're talking about, immigration, trade policy, you name it, all of this we are talking about. What we're saying is there's the taps are leaking, so let's burn the house down and solve our plumbing problem, or just leave altogether and leave the neighbourhood. All of those things, the issues with uncontrolled immigration, the issues with regard to trade, the issues with regard to security, with regard to defence, with regard to how we manage the banking system, those are all issues which can properly be dealt with if we have institutional reform in Europe. And I recognise, Hermann, that you and Nigel Farage and lots of people believe, and good people in Brexiteers in the UK believe, that the EU is unreformable. And forgive me, but this is the entrepreneur in me, because I am used to doing things that people say cannot be done. And I've had one run at this already with Libertas. And I didn't succeed. I failed. And Churchill, maybe not the best guy to quote in Galway, but Churchill said, success is the ability to go from one failure to another with no loss of enthusiasm.
Look at Theresa May.
No, absolutely. What I'm saying to you all, and I know this is an Irexit party meeting, but I'm saying that this energy, this passion, that loathing that you have for unaccountable power and the exercise of unaccountable power in the way that it touches your lives, let's not run away from it. It's not too late. This thing is not beyond salvation. It can still be reformed if people like you right across Europe, and there are millions and millions and millions of people like you right across Europe, but they have no voice. Because the Conservative Party in the UK did not represent that constituency. The people that didn't want to leave but that wanted to have major reform. I talked to great people like Dan Hannan and others and said, look, come on, let's have another run at this. I wish Nigel Farage, I said it to him years ago in his apartment in Brussels, we were having lunch, I said, let's take this thing on, let's drive to reform the European Union. But this huge constituency in Europe that does want the European Union to reform, that doesn't want it does not want to see it fail, because they know the blood-soaked history of this continent and its peoples. I'm not saying there's going to be a massive war if the EU breaks up or anything else, but let's not be, and I don't think anybody in this room is naive, it does increase the risk. It does increase the risk, because you unleash centrifugal forces that are unpredictable. And maybe there's no problem. Maybe everything's good. Or maybe it's a bloody nightmare. And the thing is I'd rather not open Pandora's box. I'd rather try and fix this thing. And if good people, like all of you here, were to come under one umbrella in Europe and really push for reform, how, as I hear the question out, if you were to do that, I think we can roll these people. Why? Because they're not talented, they're bullies, and they don't have great ideas. We have great ideas.
Just let me answer this question, and then I'll take yours in. That one is that in the treaties, in the European treaties, it says about towards ever closer union. There's a trajectory, both in the treaties and in life, that as the European Union goes on, it centralises more and more power to itself, both in the way it acts and also in its treaty powers. Two, about, and this is another very important aspect of Romano Prodi, former Italian president, said there years ago, that the two swords of the state are the army and the currency. Ireland has lost its currency. We're now in a currency of occupation called the euro, which has given us cheap credit and damaged us helped to give us boom and bust. The second thing is the army. An aspect of sovereignty is military neutrality. We were told, oh, join the EU, but it won't affect our military neutrality. No, oh yeah, and there's some Mickey Mouse protocol in the Lisbon Treaty too that will protect us from getting involved in the European Army. Oh, it's funny that, because the last time I looked there, we're already members of EU battle groups. The Dáil there last December signed us up to PESCO, permanent structure of the European Union, to do with military action. So the longer we stay in the European Union, the more costly it becomes, the less power we have. They take our fisheries, they take our money, and they're trying to build up, as we saw last week, Merkel, Macron, what was his name again? Well, Benoit, what was his? They are going towards building up a European army. And the thing I want to know, why is Irish nationalism bad? English nationalism bad? Scottish nationalism good? EU nationalism fantastic? So these people, they are building a centralised state. They want more power. They want their own currency, their own government, their own army. We are crazy. We were in an empire before. It was called the British Empire. And now is the time for ourselves to take our country, take our people, take back our power, and leave the European Union. Just one more thing, and then we'll finish, and then we'll take questions. As many questions as we can from everybody. That aspect, think about that time in 2011, when the Troika were controlling Ireland, when we had this this facade of a government in Ireland. Was it Brian Cowan and Enda Kenny sitting there? All they had the choice to decide was what the colour of the wallpaper in government buildings was going to be, and then we have this presidential Arsenal Turon, big lovely building, but was the president of a sovereign country? No, she was not. 2011, it is scandalous and shocking that the Irish budget was seen and approved in the German Bundestag before it was ever seen in Dáil Éireann. Now, if that is not a massive wake-up call to everybody that we have lost control, or we certainly have the potential to continually lose control of our own affairs, I don't know what is. I believe that Ireland is our land, it should be our laws, and we want it within our lifetime.
Hermann, it's our leaders that are allowing these decisions to be made outside of this country. It's our leader. It is because they're Europhiles. It's because they are one particular version of Europhile. But they are the ones that make these decisions. And by the way, if we leave, we're still going to have them. We're not suddenly going to have an electorate that starts voting for people that agree with you all on everything else. That's not going to happen. There isn't going to be this massive road to Damascus moment where all of these people, there was 60 whatever percent of them that voted yes in an abortion referendum a few months ago. They're not all of a sudden going to start agreeing with you on pro-life issues. I mean, not everyone here is pro-life necessarily. But the reality is, folks, there isn't going to be a big enough consensus in this country to leave the European Union. This is not the UK, because we don't even have a media. The UK had the Daily Telegraph, it has the Spectator, it has organs of media where at least you can have a debate. Ireland has none of that.
It's only beginning.
This country is the propaganda organ of this country is RTE. The RTE is in everybody's home every evening. Why are we not more open? Because the media is in the hands of people that have a particular political view.
Well, do you know what's scandalous is you have Brian there, this was about a month ago, was actually incredible. That one man, Dennis O'Brien, and I know Declan I won't. But
no. I mean, that gentleman is right. That there is a uniformly pro. I would call it centre-left Euro view, and it is absolutely uniform, and it is a bubble of the Irish elites. It's political. I mean, there is no difference between the political parties on it. There's no difference in the media on it, and anybody that's outside of that are, as Hillary Clinton would say, deplorables.
Most people have Sky TV now, and they watch the RT News, which is the Russian news. It's not Irish. So most people go on the internet.
I don't think most people do. Yeah.
I'd say what, on that thing.
Stupid. Because we might know. There's something I just want to say here. Michael Noonan and Gardner was in charge of the Federal Reserve, and there was a decision made early on in the Federal Reserve in America, not in Europe at all.
That's right.
To give credit out to anybody in any country that was needed. Throw out the money out to builders and whoever wanted to build, whatever they wanted to build, and they walked away, and some of them walked away with the stroke of a pen in the High Court over €1 billion. One man walked away with the stroke of a pen and he owed €1 billion. And it's the people here today who are suffering like us. And
I know.
And I have seen this. It's not working.
We not, but we both agree it's not working.
The corruption and the fraud that's in this country here is ridiculous.
Madam, hang on. Let me deal with this corruption thing. You're absolutely right. I could give you a very long speech on corruption. Well, I'll tell you, I've been a victim of this, and I am in the courts for years and years seeking justice on the outcome, for example, of the Moriarty Tribunal and what that's uncovered. Nothing has ever been done about it. So yes. I mean, the points that you make are valid. The point that you make about some of the bank bailout decisions being made not inside the European Union but by the Fed and elsewhere, those are valid points as well. And yes, we do have I think a systemically corrupt establishment here in Ireland at the moment. It's not that it's full of bad people, it's not, but it's systemically corrupt at this point, and we need to reform it. But leaving the European Union is not going to fix any of that. It's not going to fix it. We need to fix this thing from the bottom up, right from the bottom up, because those problems are not going to end. The problem of Irish corruption is not going to be solved by leaving the European Union. It's going to be solved here, when we all have and you guys have got the courage to stand up, challenge it, and demand that it gets resolved.
I would definitely say that we touched on the point of political media hegemony in Ireland, which is, if you travel around Europe, is incredibly, it is extreme. This kind of groupthink centred in Dublin, must hate Irish culture, its language, its games, it must love the European Union, all the UN, everything that comes from afar is to be glorified and worshipped, and everything that comes from Ireland is to be despised and put down. And I think we have to put it in there. You know what? If we're happy to finish the debate between maybe we could take questions from the floor. What do you think?
Okay.
What?
Okay, I'm fine with that. Yeah.
I'm not trying to.
In terms of our debate, I mean, let me sum up in terms of where I think, where I see us agreeing and differing, and very, very quickly. I think we actually can largely agree on what's wrong. I think that your solution for what needs to be done about it and my solution for what needs to be done about it are obviously different. But in terms of recognising the scale of the crisis, I mean, I'm not summarising for Hermann. He thinks it's unreformable. I think it is reformable. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a glasses half full guy. Now, maybe it's a case that there's a little. It's not even half full. Maybe there's just a drop in there. But I still think it can be reformed. I'm an insufferable optimist, and I think it can be done with enough will and the will of the people. But leaving, I think, opens up problems that are unpredictable.
I'd say that optimism is fantastic, but realism is even better. The kind of federalist fantasy that these people have of even more deeply centralised state, sucking in powers from the nation-state into Brussels to a small number of people, increasing their power, reducing our power, is crazy to stay in and continue to get hammered. What's the old Einstein one? Is it to repeat something again and again? It's the definition of... Sorry?
Insanity is to repeat the same thing over and over again and expect a different outcome.
Trying to get us to you afterwards. Thank you very much. That's right. Like, we've been in here, this institution, for some time. It's really, really hammered our country in this regard. And I'll just finish up that I think we're better off. Okay, Declan, thank you very much for coming. Really, right, please give a round of applause. We have a good manners and culture and to come here and debate today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So maybe, I don't know if you want to stay for questions, but I think there's quite a few questions. I don't know if you want to ask me, if you want to ask Declan. What do you think, Declan?
I'd like to ask.
I'm not trying to do you screw your work. Chairman?
Through the chair.
Yeah, through the chair.
It doesn't work very
I can hear you.
Through the chair, I must say that I'm disappointed with the both parties here who are supposed to make the case for us leaving or staying in the European Union. Declan I've known for years and I've admired what he's done here too, but he's made a very poor case here today for the European Union. If we are to leave, that's what the sign says, Irexit, should we follow the British? The case you should look for is what kind of exports and imports have we from the United Kingdom today. In 2017, a statistic I just put off my smartphone, 40% of our imports came from the United Kingdom. The remaining 18 billion came from the remainder of the European Union. In 2018, 59% of our imports came from the United Kingdom and 32% of our exports. Now, if you had statistics like that, who would you go with? Would you go with the British who were deciding to leave the European Union? Or would you stay with the European Union of less than 500 million people? And I think it is crazy. We should join the British, if possible, and leave the European Union. There is one problem, unfortunately, with that suggestion. We have been in the EEC, or European Economic Community, since about 1973. It's no longer a European community, it's a European Union, and what frightens me is what Professor Cochrane said, that we now, that the EU law take primacy over Irish law. To take the point you made about our corporation tax, if that is the case, the European Union can overrule us and bring in a corporation tax that will screw us. Every single American company in this country that give employment to tens of thousands of people may possibly leave.
And they can do it by enhanced cooperation, which Declan, you remember, was one of the things we campaigned against in Lisbon 1 and 2. Enhanced cooperation. 9 states can go ahead and form this bloc about the CCCTB, and we are absolutely shafted.
The worrying aspect that I have is I remember a time that I was pro-Europe. I remember standing on the border of Northern Ireland where I had to pay VAT at the point of entry at 25%. I was importing £1.5 million Irish pounds from the European Union at that stage, from Stanton Estate in Britain and from some entity in the middle of Spain. I was responsible for getting rid of that at point of entry, which the Irish government did not want to get rid of. So I was pro-Europe, I was pro, unfortunately, the euro, because I could see the significance of having a common currency where with an Irish pound, which was devaluing on a daily basis, if I went throughout Europe without even buying anything, I would lose all my money. So there was a case for a euro. Unfortunately, I'm not a financial individual, and I could not foresee what has happened since then. That the euro is now, we're locked into it, it's a German Dutch mark of sorts. We cannot devalue our currency, we have no control over our currency, and now we have no control over our borders. So if you look at the great chess game that's going on throughout the world, you look what has happened to Libya, Syria, Iraq, Iran, it's been controlled by others. And now there's an influx of lunatics and subversives coming into the European Union that's going to destroy us all. You go into look at Sweden, as you said, it's being burdened on a daily basis. Is this what we're going to have in Ireland? Are we part of a demonic organisation? That's what I ask. Because we have no control. Even Luke Flanagan...
Okay, well, it's certainly not democratic in the proper sense of the word. So, Chairman,
Has membership of the EU compromised the Irish nation itself?
Yes. You may remember, was it this year on the 5th of January, there was a guy who came in from Northern Ireland, I believe he was from Afghanistan, they don't even know yet. It was the first jihadist attack in Ireland. He came in across the border in Dundalk, he met some guard, and the guard asked him, so, what are you doing here? And they said, oh, I've just come across the border. And the guard, instead of taking the guy in, putting him in I can't use it, into a police van, you know what instead of putting him into a police van, they advised him, go down to Dublin and apply for refugee status. Within a few days, that jihadist nut job had killed a Japanese worker and tried to beat to death 2 Irish guys in the streets of Dundalk. Now, I understand that according to press reports, there's 150 jihadists in Ireland. They haven't been expelled, they haven't been lifted, they're still walking around the streets. They present a security risk to everybody in our country, and we're crazy to allow them come in by a legal system with facilitating mass and free movement in the Ireland itself.
Yeah.
Hello. First of all, Declan, thank you very much for attending this event. I really appreciate hearing your point of view. However, in the newspapers the other week, French government described the EU as an empire. I thought that was quite interesting. So my comment before was the EU is not a friendly club. I'm half British, half Irish, and I watched the British former Prime Minister, David Cameron, go to the EU to ask for concessions to stop the UK from deciding to Brexit. And Angela Merkel said no. She didn't give him the time of day. Therefore, I ask you, is the EU a kind of empire? It's a supranational organisation, or is it a friendly club?
It's a supranational organisation. It is insufficiently accountable to its citizens, or those that it claims as its citizens, the citizens, the subjects of its member states. It is not an empire in the same way that the British Empire or the German Empire or the French Empire or the Austro-Hungarian Empire was. In some ways for the better, in some ways for the worst. I mean, it's interesting because there was discussion here earlier on about, we left the British Empire and the British Empire and everything. I mean, actually, women's suffrage, of course, came to the UK when it did, notwithstanding the women's suffrage issue, because they didn't have a vote in England either at the time. But at the turn of the century, the last century, early 1900s, if you were a person in Galway, you had a vote, you had your MP, there actually was accountability. And Ireland was a member, not of the British Empire per se, it was a member of the United Kingdom, so it even had a more privileged relationship with England, Scotland, Wales, etc., than even Canada did, or Australia, or New Zealand, or India. And the point being that in fact, and I've made this point before, in terms of the person that could vote at the turn of the century, you arguably, and I think you could make this case very easily, had a more accountable system of government, even in the United Kingdom than you actually do now in this European Union. I'm not an apologist for the European Union as it exists right now. That French deputy minister who said that Europe needs to become an empire, who said it last week, which was no mistake, I don't think that was a slip of the tongue, those are the instincts. Those are instincts that you find in France, they're instincts that you find in Germany. Those are the instincts of a certain type of European elite that need to be kept in check, and that need to be kept in check by people like us. And I'll tell you, if that guy's imperial ambition for a united empire of France and Germany, which we have not seen yet in Europe, and that is not a very pleasant thought about it, I want Ireland to be at that table, and I want the Visegrad countries to be at that table, and I want all of these smaller nations and nation-states in Europe to be at that table, so that we don't have people running away with themselves, trying to create, the Sixth French Republic, or recreate 16th century France in all of its glory, at the cost of all of us. And the way that you'd keep them in check is by staying in the thing and making sure they don't lose the run of themselves.
Can I come back and look?
Can we have another question? Can we keep the questions?
Let me come back.
A lot of people want to get in.
Let me just respond to that very quickly. In the UK, while we were members of the British Empire, Irish MPs, the Irish population, had 16% of the vote in Westminster. In the EU, currently, we have less than 1%,
right.
0.94. So our power, relative in a certain institution, the democratic centre and fund, is much lower in the EU. In regards to the comments about empire, I believe that, look at the direction which the EU is going. They want a common foreign minister with common foreign policy. They want to build an EU army, as I mentioned already about PESCO and the EU battle groups that Ireland is already a member of, that they want so many aspects of power which belong to a national government centre drawn towards itself. So yes, they are building, actually Barroso famously called it something like an European empire, akin to an empire probably 10 years ago. And in regards to the euro, which I believe is an economic disaster visited upon the poor people of Europe, they are now using the euro. We see what happened in Greece there recently, where these people were threatened with complete destruction unless they did what their masters in Brussels told them. The Germans are now doing with banks what they tried to do with tanks over 70 years ago. And you will find that the interest of Germany always rules supreme, and its periphery are those who want to suffer.